Good evening, everyone. We now call the Huntersville Town Board regular board meeting to order. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment and join us for the moment of silence. Thank you. Now, if you'll join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment and making sure that your cell phones are either turned off or on silent, and everyone up here will do the same. And we will move into staff questions, and I do have a question for staff. Mr. Roberts, could we get a Main Street update? Who would like to provide that? Mr. Fox, there's a lot of work going outside these front two doors.
Just a real brief update on the Main Street project. As you can see, the 24-inch water line is progressing fairly well on schedule, I would say. Not as many hiccups as we figured there may be, so that's good. The work at the southern roundabout is progressing also. If you ride down that way, you can see a lot of grading has taken place on the Holly Huntersville leg of the roundabout. So still at this time, the 30-day closure, I guess, is now dwindled down to about 23, 24 more days, and the contractor's telling us that it will still take all that time. So we're hopeful they'll finish a little sooner, but right now we're still on the full closure.
Okay, well, thank you for that update. How have you had any, and maybe this is a question for Ms. Strickland, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but just the flow of parking and traffic, you all have done an excellent job at putting signs out where public parking is located. I know that fellow board members have been trying to communicate that out as well. Have we seen or heard any additional issues around that?
Not that I'm aware of. We, it was kind of, when it first closed last week, Tuesday of last week, there was, it was a little bit chaotic there for a day or so, but it seems to me that it's gotten pretty smooth and people are taking to it well. So I haven't heard of any hiccups.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you both very much. Are there any other questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Kidwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question for the town manager or the town attorney. I was curious how many current lawsuits the town is in, and are we handling those with outside law firms or in-house?
We have one suit that is involving electricities. It's being handled by outside legal counsel due to the fact that it is an extremely niche area of law.
They've been taken down. Again, the first time in May, we were notified by a resident. The last time it was by a local media source that always watches and reports out. So we don't know until we see that our videos have been taken down. So all of that, we've been in communication with the government liaison for Facebook, but we've also done some research on local municipalities as well as the School of Government in using Facebook as a live stream platform for municipal and government meetings. So at this point, it was just the request by the committee to share that information. We have looked into it. We do always live stream our meetings to YouTube. We've had a YouTube channel active since February, and that one we've not had issues with. I'm hesitant to say that out loud, but we haven't. YouTube has some better, I think the safer way, they have better measures to protect against things like this. So one of the things I asked the committee to consider is just, we need to be aware of this and watch this and see if we should look at some options regarding Facebook as a live streaming platform. We allow comments on our Facebook feed. We also allow comments on our YouTube feed. Most of the folks that do use Facebook as a feed, which are very few now because it's not a recommended platform, do not allow comments. We do. We will continue to do so, but we do so on both platforms. So we have that, but in looking at around us, people are using YouTube, they're using Boxcast like we also use. So where we sit right now is we use Boxcast to live stream this meeting, planning board meetings, HOA, any of the other meetings that we have that we live stream. We use Boxcast to do so, and we send it to both Facebook and YouTube. We're not experiencing issues anywhere except the Facebook platform. We don't have as much control over that. Their safety protocols are not the same. So I've just shared some concern with the Communications Committee about that and our ability to protect our information as well as not to have people think that we're taking videos down, especially when we don't even know they've been taken down by, obviously, I don't think TNT Sports Argentina was watching our town board meeting, but if they were, I'm not sure who said what. But it's obviously, these are bots or hackers that are on the account and they're tagging it and we're having to follow up. So I just wanted to share that with the committee, and then the committee asked that I update the entire board. So any questions?
Commissioner Partee?
Thank you, Mr. Strickland, for the town. It seems to be a pattern that's trying to extort any type of, have you ever seen any type of ransom? From these particular agencies, these foreign agencies?
We have not. I think the fact that our government liaison seems to understand that when we look at an Indian, and we have them all, we've tracked them, the Indian-themed on-demand video, they're probably not saying the same thing on their videos as you're saying from the dais, yet they can put their claim and tag our videos with their name and to encourage other people to get there. So we're watching it. Larry is aware. So I've got some concerns. Other municipalities have moved away from the Facebook platform for live streaming. They do it in multiple different ways, but we're still looking at it. But I've got some concerns if we can't control our content and our property, that we're going to have to worry about who's claiming, and if they're muting video that has no audio right there, it's a bot. It's something that we can't control, and Facebook doesn't have the things in place to control that.
Commissioner Boone?
Thank you. Madam Mayor, my issue was with last Thursday at the planning board meeting. And I started out on Facebook and had no sound, but then went over to YouTube and still continued to have no sound. So you've kind of put all the blame over here on Facebook, but someone's not doing something.
Last week was an issue, and I'm looking at Larry Davis. It was not the same issue. That was a live streaming issue, and I can't speak to that. I was not at that meeting, neither was Mr. Davis, but from what we understand, it was just a different circumstances that was probably more internal.
Is that for both planning board meetings? Because it was last week and the meeting before.
Larry is shaking his head. It's my understanding moving forward, there will always be someone from IT at all those meetings now. I believe that's the plan.
So that should not be an issue moving forward.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you.
According to Mr. Davis.
Commissioner Kidwell?
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, you spoke of YouTube as one way of getting these videos out. What are some other options? And I ask that because, we want to make sure that anyone can stream these, whether it's not on Facebook, some people don't have a YouTube account. So what are some of the options that we're looking at?
One of the things with both Facebook and YouTube truly is you don't need an account to watch. Facebook has a few more hoops that sometimes you have to jump through if you don't have an account. They ask you a lot of questions. But because Boxcast is also publicly available, We live stream through Boxcast, but you can go to Boxcast and see our videos. The town of Cornelius uses Boxcast as their primary and Facebook as their secondary, and those are their words, not mine. We have, in Davidson, they live stream through Granicus directly to their website. And then I continue to go up the interstate up to Mooresville, they live stream to YouTube and they don't allow comments. So we can still put out everything the same way, Facebook, Boxcast, YouTube. We're not having trouble with the other entities. We're having trouble with what I would describe as the potential or possible bots and hackers that are hitting our account on Facebook. And that's my concern. If they can claim our property without us having to be notified, that's of concern. And they can mute our videos.
Follow-up question. It sounds, I think we all know that Facebook's not the most secure social media site, followed by Twitter. What would be your recommendation to the board as a transition to Boxcast and YouTube, and moving away from Facebook, if that's the case?
My recommendation would be that we just, because we have an existing account with YouTube, we have a channel, we've been building it, there are years' worth of videos that we've placed on there. It's also easier to use if you're just wanting to get videos. I would suggest that we continue to use Boxcast, because that's a great also recording for archival purposes, and that we live stream to YouTube. We can continue to take comments there. You do not have to have an account. It is a free service. So it is still out there. People can still use it, but it will have a more secure, back end. That would be my suggestion. Based on us, what the School of Government has actually, and I asked them to put it in writing so it's not just me, but the School of Government said that they encourage government entities to get away from Facebook just because you can't control the bots and the hackers and you can't control it in advance. It just, if they take over the account, they take over the account.
Do you have a question? Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Loop, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have concern about the retention of the comments and public record on Facebook?
I actually, if I had been advised at the time when they set up the Facebook account, I would not have suggested that we allowed comments. I do have concerns, however, I'm sure that Kim is aware of what needs to be retained, and we are following the retention schedule that is set forth by the state. So to the best of our ability, yes, we are complying with that, but like I said, I would not have recommended that we allow comments if I was here from the get-go.
Ms. Strickland, oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner.
Basically, I'll honest in my view of Facebook. I would strongly advocate what Ms. Strickland is suggesting that we do. I'm honestly a fan of abandoning Facebook altogether. It's a useless platform. It really, the lack of security, the lack of basic just administration that we are allowed to have over our own account is ridiculous. YouTube sounds like a much more favorable. I'm okay with us continuing Boxcast. I would strongly suggest we look at live streaming via YouTube. The comments, people have a right to be heard, so I'm fine with leaving the comments on, but I just want to say I am very much in support of us leaving Facebook altogether. That's all.
Thank you. I have a question for you, and that's making the assumption the board doesn't decide to leave Facebook altogether. The ability to share the YouTube video to Facebook, what implications, if any, are there for it? Nobody can flag that, can they?
I'm not sure we would want to share the because right now we're streaming to both platforms equally.
Okay.
So there would be not a need to share it to Facebook later, because then you've kind of done the same thing. You've just taken it off of, and for practical purpose, to buffer and render a video of great length would take a while to put it back. So if we were to want to continue live streaming, which I believe we do, I did share with Larry after, the state of emergency, once the governor declares that's ending, it doesn't have to be. It's not a requirement. So I think what we're saying is we want to continue it. It is a way for our community to see what goes on and hear what goes on in the room. It's up to the board if we want to do comments. I know we have them. No, the School of Government doesn't suggest we have them, but we have them now. So we have them on YouTube. We don't have to take them away, but we would just move all of our efforts to be primary YouTube and archiving with Boxcast. We maintain the public records. We've maintained everything because all of these accounts are socially archived now anyway. But all of the disputes, it would be interesting to see what some of these are, but we don't get to see them. So I think it's more stable, and it's still open, and it provides a free way for the community who can't or don't want to come into this meeting to see what's happening, to hear what's happening, to still engage with the members on this dais.
Thank you so very much. Any other questions before we let Ms. Strickland go? Well, thank you for the update. We greatly appreciate that and look forward to the decision the board's going to make in regards to moving forward. We'll now move to public comments. And first up is Mr. Jeff Snye. Mr. Snye, have you come to speak during public comments or? Yes, you've come to speak during public comments. Well, everyone's come to speak on the same topic, so please join. And as you come, state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Let me set my timer. Jeff Snye, 13945 Old Vermillion. First, I'll just start as me, the citizen. I wasn't prepared to talk about this, but since we were just having the conversation on Facebook, it would just be of my opinion to drop the streaming of the meetings on Facebook altogether. And I don't think there should be comments on those. I don't think when we sit on the dais or any of you are on the dais that those comments should be looked at and monitored during a meeting and questions asked based on those. And I do know that happens, and I don't find that appropriate. If I can switch hats, though, and go to my planning board hat. I was recently elected as the chair of the planning board. I know that disappoints at least one of you on the board. It probably won't be the last disappointment in your life. I do want to apologize during the Maxwell Townhomes thing. I was humming a Taylor Swift song, and that may have been what got that video kicked off. But 2 months ago, we discussed, as the board, the quasi-judicial process. I went into that meeting. I know I wasn't the only one, but I was prepared to vote to make it administrative. Much to my surprise, after a healthy conversation that most people didn't get to hear out in the meta world, we voted unanimous as a board to keep it as quasi-judicial. I think that's important to point out, if for no other reason. Our rationale to it was that we, although a sliver, we as a town, we as the planning board, you as commissioners, maintain a sliver of leverage over the developers that are coming in. And you can have that conversation. And if they know that they have to come in and have a conversation and look for a little bit of a win-win, then things get done. If they know that they can come in, they don't have to have that conversation, They drop off their paperwork, and if they're asked to change something, they can just say no, because I can say no, then they're going to do that. It's human nature. We need to maintain the little bit of leverage. And with that leverage, you'll note that it often comes from our community members. They come in. They want to be heard. Commissioner Munger just said, people have a right to be heard. They do have a right to be heard. I know they don't always understand the process of quasi-judicial and whatever, but things do happen from that. And I very much ask you to consider that tonight before you move forward. All right? And then I'll leave it at that because I know my other board members have things to say as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hal Bankner? It has been a long time, sir. So I will remind you to please state your name and your address for the record, and you have 3 minutes, and it's good to see you tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do recall something about name and address, but it is Hal Banker, 17206 Lakesview Lane, and it is good to see members of the board with whom I've had previous experience. I hope you've all been well during this interesting time. Like Chairman Snye, I am also going to talk about Agenda Item 9A. While our planning staff is really excellent, my 11 years of experience on the planning board demonstrates differences with their analysis and certainly some of their recommendations. Planning boards and the like, they're called different things, different places, were created by the state to allow for citizen representation in land use decisions and in land use policies. Towns are chartered by the state, pardon me. And although their boards vary greatly, they have the legal gravitas and the authority to do what's necessary concerning land use policies and decisions. But they still also represent the people. That's who elected you. And you provide oversight to the planning board by way of its membership and its levels of authority. Planning staff will no doubt mention that other municipalities may have gone the administrative route. In my view, surrender of the authority and representation of the bodies I just mentioned, the boards, planning board, town board, to employees of the town who are neither elected nor appointed will be an abrogation of your responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. The last person signed up to speak this evening is Emmanuel Allen. And it is my understanding that Tamia Williams has given you her 3 minutes. So you have 6 minutes total. And thank you. And as you come, please remember to state your name and address for the record. We look forward to hearing from you.
My name is Emmanuel Allen at 13228 Central Avenue and 13232 Central Avenue. And my family has properties adjoining that property. Properties behind those two homes. Good evening, Mayor Bates, commissioners, and good people of Huntersville. I'm compelled to speak tonight on the hypocrisy that I witnessed in your decisions-making process last week, 7/18/22. I wish to highlight and implore you to objectively review your conduct on that night. Below is a list of objective observations I made as a consequence of that meeting. Our attorney, Yolanda Taylor, requested a continuance on 7/17, and it was denied based on a premise that we did not have standing. She expressed our intent to be present at the 7/18 meeting and to prove our standing in regards to Villia Village. The applicant, Vinaya Bowman, requested a continuance on 7/18, and we were not notified of his request, nor given professional courtesy that should have been extended, which resulted in us, a community organization, paying legal fees of 10-plus hours to an attorney. Attorney Sloop's response was that there was no way to determine the commission's decision to accept his request. But it's my determination, based on what was said in the meeting, there was no way forward, no path forward without the applicant being present. So regardless, there was no way to go but to accept his request. Then I was sitting out front, and Mr. Solomon from Plum Creek Community Homeowners Association came in after 6 o'clock and requested to speak. And I heard him talking to the welcome hostess out front. And he was told that he came in after 6, and time had expired for requesting speaking. And I'm not sure what happened after that, but he was allowed to speak and afforded opportunity to state his standing when the QJ began for Hamlet Development, which is adjacent to Plum Creek. Upon opening the QJ, Mayor Bates did an outstanding job on reading the rules of the QJ, emphasizing the need to have only witnesses standing, and the pros and cons had to be factual, objective, with expert testimony. The Plum Creek HOA was denied standing and reminded that testimony would be allowed, but not be considered as an expert witness and could not cross-examine witnesses. The matter of the adjoining road from Plum Creek to and from their new neighbor was the only objection to the project. It was stated that since the neighborhood was established in 1990, there was never a need for dual access for fire or police to come into their neighborhood, and described Plum Creek as very quiet and peaceful. But giving access to their new neighbors could threaten the peace and security of Plum Creek. When security was mentioned, the attitude of the commission seemed to change. All understood that what the objection implied. Though Attorney Sloop objected twice and stated the town ordinance of 6.100.3, there shall be adjoining streets, not should, the commission voted to eliminate the adjoining road with a barrier and approved the development. You knowingly and willingly violated your own ordinance because of unsubstantiated fears. I never once heard anyone mention the fact that Plum Creek might need multiple entrances in the case of fire or police assistance. And these are people moving, or what we consider new neighbors. And it would definitely threaten the peace and security of their neighborhood. Mr. Solomon objected to his neighbors being allowed to walk his neighborhood streets. And that, to me, is not being a very welcoming approach. The community of Pottstown, however, does not enjoy the ear of this commission. We have neither police sergeants, Rotary Club members, nor the fire department chiefs living in our boundaries. By the way, I thought it was very unprofessional for the fire and police personnel to sign off on a petition excluding that adjoining road when they are well aware of the existence and the intent of the town ordinance 6.100.3. There are hardworking, honest people in Pottstown and who have come here to beg and plead our commission for peace, safety, and security for years, but they have been ignored. I would ask in the future, and when we mention systemic racism, we're speaking of not having equal respect and equal access to resources this commission can grant. I pray that in the future, you will knowingly and willingly do the right thing by all citizens of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. We'll now move to agenda changes. Are there any agenda changes? There's a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Is there a second? There is a motion and there is a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we will move forward with this agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a
Second.
motion and there is a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. We'll now move into our public hearing for the evening. This is conduct a public hearing on petition S22-02, Novant Health Special Sign District. Good evening, how are you?
Good. I hope you all are well.
We are. Before you enter your staff report into the record, since this is a joint public hearing, I would like to take a moment and ask our planning board to stand and identify themselves this evening. Yes. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Now I will turn it over to you.
All right. So it's great to see you all tonight. I will be presenting S2202 Novant Health Special Sign District and would like to enter my staff report into the record. There are three options for sign regulation under Article 10 of the zoning ordinance. 1, adhere to the standard sign regulations detailed in Article 10. 2, utilize the plan development flexibility option. 3, utilize the special sign district option. Novant Health is a part of a special sign district originally approved in 2005 when the facility was named Presbyterian Hospital. Hospitals have complex signage needs, and a special sign district was the best option for the site because of the greater flexibility allowed. Presently, Sign Art has petitioned to amend the special sign district. They are requesting a 38-square-foot wall sign on an exterior canopy of a newly completed addition, that's the picture of the sign right there, and then the arrow, of course, is pointing to the wall where it will go, not the exact wall because the construction's not done, but that area. In considering the proposed rezoning petition S2202 Novant Health Special Sign District, staff recommends approval based on the policies detailed in the staff report. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held July 21st. No one from the public attended. The planning board is August 23rd, and town board decision is September 19th. The applicant has a representative here tonight if you all have any questions for them. They do not have a presentation for you all. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open that up for questions. Board members, do you have any questions this evening? Seeing none from the planning board, does anyone from the planning board have any questions regarding this proposal? Seeing none, we will close that public hearing. Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now move to item 9A. And this is petition TA 22-05. Mr. Semino, are you with us this evening?
I am.
Oh, there you are. I'll turn it
Mayor.
over to you.
So I entered the staff report into the record. This is to amend the zoning and subdivision ordinance to change major subdivision process from quasi-judicial process to a staff approval administrative process, and also some miscellaneous ordinance cleanup adjustments. In Huntersville, there's 3 steps for subdivision approval. First is a subdivision sketch plan. That is the quasi-judicial decision. The second step is a preliminary plat. If the sketch plan is approved, that's a staff approval. And then the third and final step is final plat, where they create the meets and bounds description and be able to sell lots. And that also is staff approval. So our current rules have some subjective standards, which, because they have some subjective standards, we have to follow the quasi-judicial process. So we get a subdivision sketch plan application. The developer has a neighborhood meeting. There's a planning board recommendation, and then there's a town board decision. In your agenda packets, the proposal was to change all the standards to objective standards. So get rid of the subjective standards, just make them recommendations. And then therefore, we could follow an administrative process. So we still would have the sketch plan application. We would recommend in the staff report, there would be a neighborhood meeting, and this could inform citizens as what's happening around them. There would not be a planning board recommendation, and the decision as it's presented in your staff report is for it to be a staff administrative decision that is following the recommendation of the School of Government that recommends staff approve it, since there's no room for policy choices, or discretion. However, having said that, you could have the planning board or the town board approve an administrative process. So it doesn't have to be staff. It could be elected officials or a planning board to say. I will mention in your staff report, you'll see there's a recommendation 5-4. The Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board recommended the changes as proposed. However, as Mr. Snine noted earlier, the planning board did recommend unanimously to keep the quasi-judicial process that we currently have. So not change that, but just make the cleanup changes that were on an attachment that was included in your agenda packet. So just kind of getting the citations correct and spelling correct and things of that nature. So that was their recommendation. Having said that, I do want to point out we have, 7 different requests being processed now, right? So what we need to just kind of keep in mind is if we make a change tonight, we have multiple applications that are in process. And so using the state statute, there's something called permit choice. So if rules change while a development is being processed, the developer has a choice to follow the new rules or stay with the old rules. So that's an option that's available. I would also say if we do decide to make any changes from what's in the agenda packet, so if we do administrative, but it just go to the town board, or we do administrative and go to the planning board, or if we keep it quasi-judicial and go to the Board of Adjustments, we will need to make changes throughout the subdivision ordinance and some zoning ordinance changes, and we will need to re-advertise, but that's not a problem for us. We can make that happen. We'll make that happen as quick as possible. The main thing is to get it right the way the board wants to be done. So having said that, I am finished, and I'm happy to answer any questions the town board has.
Chair will now open it up for discussion. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Phillips?
Jack or Emily, can you guys clarify with the current quasi-judicial, what is considered an expert, a technical expert, and what is a person with legal interest in the subject property?
So an expert, it depends on what they're trying to testify about. So for example, what we frequently see is someone who wants to come and speak about property values. That would require a licensed appraiser who is licensed in North Carolina to provide that type of testimony. That's required by statute. And it's also required by statute when someone is coming to speak about traffic and the impact of traffic on safety, that per statute also requires an expert. So it really depends on what it is that they're trying to testify about as to who would be qualified as an expert. We always have to have the foundation laid to determine whether or not that person is actually an expert. And then as far as standing, which I believe is what you were also asking about, the statutes also set forth who has standing. It would be the property owner, the applicant who is applying for whatever development regulation approval is at stake, the town board, and also it would be someone who can prove that they would suffer special damages if the application were approved.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I've just got some comments, if that's okay. We've heard a lot about making this administrative, and I kind of equate that to, before I met my wife, online dating. And basically, I'd go there and say, I'm looking for somebody who is this, 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 and this. And if they met those check marks and we got matched, and I sent a like to her, she sent a like to me, and we go on a date and see if, we were compatible. And I will tell you, every one of them were a no. Just wasn't going to happen. And if we send this process to the administrative level like that, it's the same thing. Except they can now say, well, you met all the check marks, you pass. It's like an arranged marriage. So why do we want to do that to the people of this town? We're going to take what little voice they have on by right projects away. We are going to force a marriage with a developer that gives them no opportunity to speak. And we saw the benefit of that with that project off of Jim Kent Road, where one guy just said, listen, I'm concerned that you're going to build these $1 million houses right by my house. I'm going to go out my back door where I've been able to look at trees and pastures, and I'm just going to see a back of a house now. And they said, well, we can work with you on that. We can work with you on that. And that's just a sliver. Now, some of my fellow board members will call it false hope. We're giving the people false hope that they can go up there and change it. We know, and it is the process, that most of the by right projects that come before us are going to pass. But I don't call it false hope. I call it the ability to allow the people to talk, and it gives them the opportunity to sway the developer even in the slightest. Swaying a developer in the slightest that may benefit a neighbor, because most of our developers want to be, and we hear it from them, we want to be a good neighbor. We want to be a good neighbor. Most, not all, but most say that. And this, by keeping it non-administrative, gives that opportunity. It gives us that opportunity to leverage. It gives the people a voice. And I don't think we need to take that away and force a marriage down their throats. I personally would like to see this to go to the Board of Adjustments. The Board of Adjustments handles mostly all quasi-judicial anyway. They do it very well. I've watched as they've navigated some difficult ones in the past and some easy ones in the past. And we've put qualified individuals on that board to make those decisions in the past, and I'm sure we'll do it in the future. Now, it might not be a popular opinion with the rest of my board members, and that's fine. But, I would say let's not remove what little voice an individual has or a neighborhood has, so they have the ability to speak. Otherwise, a developer is going to walk in to the planning staff. I meet all the qualifications. It gets rubber stamped, and no one has a say. And that's wrong. We have to look out beyond what's easy for the board, because no one up here likes quasi judicial. There's not a person up here, except maybe the mayor, who loves reading from her 3-ring binder for 17 minutes on the rules and processes, which literally will put my baby to sleep. I've taped it, he listens to it, he falls asleep. It's amazing, thank you for that.
More than welcome.
But seriously, let's not jump to the administrative level. Let's put this on the Board of Adjustments. And it still gives us the opportunity to talk to the public. It gives the public to go in front of that board and let, them say, this is what I feel. And that board, who has done a great job in the past, will continue to do a good job saying, we understand that. The developer may say, we hear you, we'll make, conditions on that, and it'll still get approved. I think they've only denied 1 or 2 in the history of anything going in front of them, and I believe that was just variances. I implore my fellow commissioners to think about that as we move forward on this decision. And I know that we all don't agree on that, and that's okay. I respect your guys' point of view on that. I strongly feel that this is the right thing to do, is to move it to Board of Adjustments.
Is anyone else? Is there a motion? Commissioner Munger?
Yeah. Actually, a couple questions for Jack to start off. For by right projects that currently come to the planning department, have you ever had the opportunity to request from the applicant some minor deviation for what they're trying to build or put together?
The answer to that is yes. When we review a plan, and there are hundreds of them that we review a year, there are things that we would say we would recommend you do that. But we make it very clear it's a recommendation, and we make it very clear what's a requirement. Because some developers are willing to make adjustments, and if we can make a better plan, great. But it is our job to make sure that the applicant knows very clearly on these page after page of designs, this is what we would recommend you do, this is what you must do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and typically, it's probably hard to cite specific numbers, but are they open to those changes or those recommendations that you have made?
I'll just say it depends. It depends. Some are. Yes.
Okay. One of the other questions I have is specific to LU 11.1, protect existing housing stock. How does planning staff go about evaluating whether or not that policy is upheld?
Right, so 11.1, I'll give you an example of the rental home community that we had just recently come before the town board. When that plan first came in, it had its density spread throughout the development, including up against Plum Creek. We advised them that the board has language in the subjective standards that the board can approve development that's most beneficial to that adjoining property. That's part of that subjective standard. And we recommended that they reduce the density, the number of units that are next to the border of Plum Creek. In addition, we recommended a larger buffer than the 20-foot. In the end, when it came before this board, it was a 50-foot buffer. They had a solid fence that they were putting up, which I think was part of a negotiation with the homeowners during their neighborhood meetings. And they reduced the density down of those units. So we were able, in our minds, to say, okay, now you're trying to protect that adjoining community. So that's an example.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up that specific subdivision, if you will. Hypothetically, and hopefully I'm not going too far off base here, but had this decision already been finalized 6 months ago, and they said the hamlet came to the planning department, because it wouldn't have come to quasi-judicial at that point since it was a subdivision change, correct?
Correct. If we amended this ordinance like you
6 months
see
ago.
proposed, right, yes, the answer
Yeah,
to that would
and
be,
they chose, yeah, we want administrative all the way down the line. Would we have ended with the same result? And if not, what would have changed?
well, it's hard to kind of think about what would
apologize
change,
for
but I will tell you this.
Yeah.
They would not have been required to do more than 20 feet,
Okay.
and they would not have been required to reduce the density along that border. Would they have, and so our notes on the plan would have been, boy, we recommend you do this. But it would be just a recommendation, not a requirement. So I would dare say in that case, it'd be less likely we'd see what we got.
So LU 11.1 does not give you the specific power to say, because this would change the existing housing stock in the surrounding communities, we not just recommend, I don't know how else to put it, but demand that a further buffer be established.
The answer to that question is we could not require that, if I'm getting to where I think you're wanting me to go.
Right.
So let's go actually to the subdivision ordinance language. So you've got this in your agenda packet, and there's a lot of pages, over 50 pages of, but if you look at number 2, conformity, the way the rule is written today, it says all proposed subdivisions shall be planned to facilitate the most advantageous development of the entire neighboring area. That is really subjective. That puts it in the quasi-judicial process. When we go to administrative, we got to change that that shall to a should. You should do this. So would they be required? No. Would we advise them to do it? Yes. Does that address your question?
It does, and should not shall. My apologies for not being at the last meeting. It seemed to be a highlight. I appreciate answering the questions. The issue I have, it really comes down to that shall not should. If we don't follow our own ordinances when we do a quasi-judicial hearing, it is my fear that we open ourselves up to greater liability. And specifically to that end, the hamlet shall connect. We didn't. That, to me, is problematic. I don't know, this one, you have no idea how long I've struggled. I would imagine everyone on this board, I try not to take any specific, I know everyone on this board has struggled with this one. This has been without a doubt the most difficult thing to figure out. But for me, and to Commissioner Kidwell's, I'm the guy. I'm the one that said false hope. Every time I have someone come up to us and say, on this quasi-judicial matter, can't talk about it, can't talk about it. And they look at you and they implore you and they just want to drive home that point that this is going to affect me directly. From a quasi-judicial perspective, we must look at it in legal black and white. To go beyond that scope is to shirk our duties. And so anyone that would say that we're shirking our duties by shifting this back to administrative, it's clear. It gives people the understanding that it is an administrative function, because if you do it as a quasi-judicial function, it gives people the idea that maybe we can skirt around the law. You really just can't. The second you skirt around that law, you open yourself up to so much future liability. You have to pay attention to the laws. And one of the things I would implore us to do is to look at our existing ordinances and identify, where are we running short? Where does it make sense that we should change things? Quasi-judicial is false hope. And I don't know how else to put it. And This is, I don't know why, but this has been the most difficult thing for me to look at being on this board. I apologize for being overly wordy and catching you off guard, Jack, but it's a struggle, as I'm sure you're aware. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor. I can understand the intimidation factor of trying to decide or preside over a quasi-judicial proceeding. And just not speaking for myself, I know you were talking about other commissioners. You know, I'm not intimidated by the judicial process, having presented hundreds of criminal cases before a court, giving testimony in pretrial evidentiary suppression hearings, testifying as an expert witness, which I understand, that you have to be an expert and testify and certified by the courts, and also a certified interviewer and interrogator. It's a learned process to sit before your residents, our residents, and stand in judgment over them. It's intimidating. You can't think about your next election. You got to think about how you're going to serve the residents of Huntersville. As an elected official, I take responsibility for my position. But what I do have issues with is giving a civilian committee the authority and the power over a town board. And that's unacceptable to me. So however we decide today, I'm not in favor of giving it to the Board of Adjustments. It's just not possible, and it should not be even our mindset to empower a committee with such authority. That's all I have to say, Mayor.
Anyone else? Any additional comments? A motion? Commissioner Commissioner Boone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Jack, thank you for your presentation. I think we've seen this a few times. But when I ran for office, I signed up. I knew what the job was. It says quasi-judicial. If you want to run for the board, that's going to be part of your job. Now that when nobody likes it, and now we're going to take our responsibility and slough it off into somebody else, that's not acceptable to me. That is my responsibility, to sit here and listen to the evidence. As far as the Board of Adjustment is concerned, that is probably the worst idea that we could come up with. You talk about legal fees in the future, it would be enormous. And I can just bring back a case that was last year with the Board of Adjustment. I think it was with a swim buffer. And to approve a swim buffer, you have to make 4 points. And the chairperson of the Board of Adjustment said they only made 3, but they went ahead and approved the swim buffer. But the point is that the assistant town attorney was in the meeting, and he said, you can't approve this unless they have all 4 of the qualifications met. And another member of the Board of Adjustment says, you're not the Board of Adjustment attorney. And the Board of Adjustment went ahead and approved that, and that just shows that would open up a legal end for anybody else, and I am absolutely for keeping it in my responsibility and my scope of work, because that's what I ran on, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. Thank you.
Commissioner Kovacs.
I am of the mindset that I do think it should go to the Board of Adjustments because it is what they do commonly and the way that they practice. And I'm also of the mindset that if we're worried about litigation, staying with the town board is not the way to go. To stop that, at our last quasi-judicial, I believe some information was stated that was not provided in packets, and that right there could be something that opens us up to litigation. So I have a motion prepared whenever we're ready.
Any other comments? Commissioner Phillips?
I guess since everybody else spoke, I have to. I hate quasi-judicial, and I think it's the worst part of this job because not everybody operates under the purview of it in the same manner. People interpret how they operate under quasi-judicial. I personally get so freaked out that I'm going to get in trouble that if I even suspect an email is quasi judicial in matter, I will forward it to our town attorney, which I bless her for putting up with my paranoia, and have her read it before I will ever read it, because I don't want to do the wrong thing. I take this job more seriously than I take anything in my life, and it's an honor to get to sit up here, but it's also my job to communicate with the 60,000 plus people we represent in this town. And I hate when people say, hey, I sent you an email. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't read it. I'm sorry, we can't talk about this. And there are times where I would just love to say, you know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry y'all are going through this, because that's, you know, black and white is what quasi judicial is, but there still needs to be a human component to this stuff for the board. And I'm rambling a lot because I feel like I've talked about how much this process stinks for 3 years, when we have a mother who is not considered an expert in her child's safety, and we can't listen to her speak. And that has stuck with me through this process. It will always stick with me through this process. And it's antiquated. And when we have school of government saying, you guys need to go this way because you're getting into troublesome waters, you need to listen. School of government's not a joke. And if they're the same people that provide our ethics training and all these other things, we adhere to them on everything else that we do for the most part. Why would we not listen to them on a legal matter as well?
Anyone else? Is there a motion? Commissioner Kovacs?
I have to bear with my voice, sorry. In considering petition TA 22-05, motion to amend the subdivision and zoning ordinances by removing the quasi-judicial process from planning board recommendation and town board decision, and assign the Board of Adjustments these decisions without input from other boards or committees, and include these changes with the edits in attachment 8 of the packet.
Second.
Attachment 8.
Yeah, and I had to change it to 9, but it's the one that has all of the minor changes to the text amendment.
Attachment 9. I wrote this for last week's meeting.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
There's a motion. There's Commissioner Munger.
Yeah, excuse me, I'd like to make a substitute motion. In considering the proposed amendment, TA 22-05, the town board recommends approval based on the amendment being consistent with policies LU1, LU2, LU3, and LU4 of the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan. It is reasonable and in the public interest to amend the zoning ordinance because the town board has determined that subdivision sketch plan should be considered under an administrative process as opposed to a quasi-judicial process.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so we are now on a substitute motion. Give me just a second. All right. There is a motion and a second on the substitute motion. All those in favor of of Commissioner Munger's motion?
The substitute.
And those opposed? Okay, so it's 3-3. And the motion on the floor, to be clear, is the motion that is recommended in the packet to change quasi-judicial from the town board to an administrative process, correct? Correct. Okay. Well, I have given this one a lot of thought over the last year, because we've been discussing this off and on for a long time now. And I am of the opinion that quasi-judicial does leave our citizens with a void, the inability to talk to commissioners. And it does make more sense to shift that process to administrative. I agree with some things that I've heard this evening in regards to mitigating risk for our community and mitigating risk and ensuring that our community is protected from a legal perspective is very important. And one that, as we go through this process, frankly, I think that after 72%, if they think that's correct, Ms. Loop, 72% of municipalities in the state of North Carolina use the administrative process.
Correct.
There's a reason for that. So my vote this evening will be for this motion, the administrative motion. Thank you, Mr. Semino. With that, we'll move on to item 9B, and it's consider updating the town personnel policy, Article 8, leave policies, and I turn this over to Ms. Cagle.
Mayor and Commissioners. This item is a follow-up to the board action earlier this year to recognize Juneteenth as a holiday at the board level and subsequent discussions around making it an official holiday for all town employees. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Go right ahead, Commissioner Bertie.
I make a motion to add Juneteenth as an annual staff holiday starting on Monday, June 19th, 2023.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Kidwell.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Boone for putting this in front of us in the beginning of the year, knowing that the federal had made it a holiday, and it's only right. So thank you.
Anyone else? Motion, there is a motion, there is a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. We will now move to our mayor and commissioner reports. And I have a little bit of information this evening to share with all of you. The EDC has launched a new app, and I would encourage you to download that app. It's called LNED, and it will give you some updates. They will generate information through that app for our community. The other thing that the EDC is working on with the Education Collaborative is to connect with our area schools, partnering with them, and looking forward to some new programming for the new school year, connecting businesses and schools together, as well as looking for internship opportunities. My MTC update for the board, this one is interesting, so I will be looking to you all for input. Wednesday night's MTC meeting, we had an information session on advancing the 2030 Transits Plan, Connect Beyond, and the presentation was specific to the red line and the need to update that plan. Frankly, this is probably, in my opinion, what should have happened in 2019. Instead of studying other possible corridors, they should have used those dollars to invest in updating the 2009 plan. But there's several reasons for the request for the update. One, they need to update the design of grade crossings. They need track design, which would allow for increased frequency of service over the old design. They've heard the three communities up here talk about the old plan only sends train service down to Charlotte in the morning and back up in the evening. That's not acceptable. And so they would need to look at other track design to allow for frequency throughout the day. There would be an update of the village technologies that would be used. So, for example, we've already expressed no diesel train. We don't want a diesel engine coming up through downtown. So they would need to look at other options other than diesel. They would need to reevaluate the station locations along with drainage, et cetera, and a new alignment into Uptown. And the goal is to get the project ready to compete for federal funding. Now, Mr. Lewis was asked about funding of the study, like were they going to ask for funding from us? Were we going to have to pitch in? No, CATS has set aside $5 million for this update. If you have questions, reach out. I have several of my own, and I'm working to get answers to those. I'd love to gather your questions as well to get answers for you. And then the MTC will vote on this update in our September meeting. So we've got not quite 2 months to talk about it and ask our questions. The only other thing I would like to highlight, a couple of things actually I'd like to highlight, is our podcast. For residents, I don't know if you're aware, but on Podbean, I say that right? Podbean? Huntersville has a new podcast, and I would encourage you to get online, download it, and just listen in. There's been 3 podcasts so far, so check those out. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is, I'm sure board members you have heard, but the county has moved to a community level of high in regards to COVID. So just be aware that the Omicron BA.5 variant appears to be more contagious and more resistant to immunity from vaccines or previous COVID-19 illnesses. So just, I'll give you that update to say, stay safe. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor. With Visit Lake Norman, Top Gun Softball Summer World Series was recently held July 22nd through the 24th. Youth softball tournaments featured 47 teams, more than half of which traveled from 90 miles or more, with numerous teams from West Virginia. Play was held at Bradford Park and Westmoreland Athletic Complex, in addition to other parks in the region. I'm giving an update about Davidson, but this is pretty cool. The Lake Norman Fondo is coming up Sunday, August 14th in downtown Davidson. Cycling events will feature 3 rides, 30 miles, 50 miles, and 75 miles. Anticipate 500 total cyclists from across the southeast. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And you just said that the shortest route is 30?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm not in. Commissioner Partee?
Thank you, Mayor. On August 19th, I attended the monthly Greenway Trail and Bikeway Commission meeting. The next meeting will be on August 16th at 6 p.m. at the Town Center, and it's open to the public. And as always, I advocate for gun safety, especially in the homes where guns are stored and children are present. Accidental and intentional discharge causes serious injury and death. The Huntersville Police Department has free gun safety locks. Organizations and individuals can contact the police department or me at dpartee@huntersville.org. Let's be child safe. Finally, I want to bring awareness to the nonprofit organization named Cool Kids Clubhouse in honor of Dan Jensen, located here in Huntersville. Cool Kids Clubhouse mission is devoted to improving the quality of life for pediatric cancer patients. Check out their website and donate. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Munger?
Thank you, Mayor. This Thursday, August 4th, 2022, at 3:30 p.m., the Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board will meet right here in this chamber to go over ordinance advisory issues. And then next Wednesday, August 9th, 2022, the Public Arts Commission will meet in the atrium of the Discovery Place Kids building. I'm sure it's called something else, but that's what I came up with at the time. And as always, if you have the opportunity to give, please consider supporting our local nonprofits. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Kidwell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. CRTPO, last meeting, it was pretty intense as far as the conversation's going. We received an unsolicited offer from an unknown company, as NCDOT said, to put toll lanes in South Charlotte, basically from 277 down. Now, while everybody on the CRTPO board knew who it was, NCDOT said, we don't know and we can't tell you. Then they called the solicitor to ask them if they could tell, and they never received a word back. We received an update this past week that Centra has submitted a proposal to put in these toll roads down through South Charlotte. Strangely enough, they did all this work and knew all the engineering, but had no contact with NCDOT. At CRTPO, we had to vote whether we wanted to look into this and ask questions and see if this was something we needed to do, or did we want to continue with our focus on what we have already planned at CRTPO through the TCC committee. And I'm throwing out a lot of acronyms here. It was an 8-6 vote against looking into a toll road, yet CRTPO is a weighted vote. Charlotte carries 51% or 50%, so it passed with 6 municipalities in favor, 8 against, for the TCC to take time away and look into this. And the reason I'm saying this is we are in a redesignation year for CRTPO. This will be, and I spoke with other municipalities, this is a big time because we can actually look at how the rules are written, and potentially, if we do a non-weighted vote, which is what that means, going forward, everybody would have the same vote, whether it's City of Charlotte, Town of Waxhaw, Town of Huntersville, or the Town of Davidson, allowing everybody an equal playing field at CRTPO. That is all, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Kidwell. I look forward to you keeping us posted on that. Commissioner Kovacs?
The Lake Norman Chamber, there is a ribbon cutting this week. Angels and Sparrows will be doing a ribbon cutting at their new resource center on Wednesday at 9 a.m. at the Rama Executive Park, 320 Siegel Street, Suite 8. So please join them if you're able. And they are also still, accepting applications for the 26th class of Leadership Lake Norman and seeking sponsors for the Business Expo at the Huntersville Recreation Center on October 11th.
That's it. Thank you. Commissioner Boone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very briefly, usually the first Tuesday in August is National Night Out. The Cornelius and Davidson will be having their National Night tomorrow. Huntersville's decided to do theirs when it's a little cooler, and they're looking for the month of October. And I have nothing from the police department. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. October, huh? We're looking forward to that. All right. Anything else from our board? Commissioner Phillips?
The 2-year anniversary of the Colonial Pipeline spill is coming up. 2 million gallons, largest spill on U.S. soil. Colonial Pipeline is welcome to come to Huntersville Town Hall at any time and give an update to the public.
Thank you, Commissioner Phillips, and I appreciate you reminding me. I'm actually meeting with them on Wednesday to discuss just that. Commissioner Munger?
Sure. So hopefully this is sincere, or you take it as sincere. First of all, I just would like to apologize to this board, town staff, and the people of town of Huntersville for not being in attendance in our last meeting. I think one of the things that I learned from watching that meeting is that we have a dire need to reinstate the 3-on-3s and to allow all board members, including myself, to work out details and get needed information prior to the actual town board meeting. I know it sometimes sounds like an oxymoron, but I do believe in government efficiency, and bringing back the 3-on-3s will help push us in that direction. If some board members do not wish to attend, that can be their individual choice, but I would argue that we can all benefit from these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other closing comments, Commissioner Kovacs?
Just on a personal level, today, my 6-year-old and I were sitting on the front porch, and cars were speeding down our street, and he acted like a grown man saying, "You need to slow down," and then he went into a whole dialogue about how people need to follow the speed limit and so on and so forth. And then we left later to go to the library, and to my surprise, I got to drive over a speed hump. So I just wanted to say thank you to our crews on the ground for, I wanted to say thank you to my fellow commissioners for approving the traffic calming devices on Greenway, and then to the crews on the ground for working so hard because it was raining on and off randomly today. And they still were able to get a third of them done. So I'm probably the only person jumping up and down about driving over speed humps. And my 6-year-old.
Thank you, Commissioner Kovacs. All right, if there's no other closing comments, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Partee?
I want to say thank you to my granddaughter, Tiana Partee, for coming tonight and sitting there patiently watching her granddad. Thank you.
All right, is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Good night, Huntersville. Thank you for joining us this evening.